Are we on? I should say this. Hello? I do know where I am because 5 years ago, I came here for the first time to start research. So it's 5 years almost to the day that I first came to Graceland. And Angie out there who runs archives set me up a little space at the back. And I was with my team and we started researching and living it, really. And to think 5 years later, after going and starting in Cannes, we're at Coachella with Doja Cat doing that number. And then, you know, Cannes, then we did London, then we're Australia, then we were LA, Texas. I'm back in Graceland. And I just put a piece out today to that great Paul Simon song, we're going to Graceland, Graceland. And here we are.
Well, the second the film starts, it's clear it is your vision.
Is that a bad thing?
That's a wonderful
sure?
thing. No, and the first thing I thought of was every single, you know, inch of the movie, if you would say there, snap of the movie, is so well thought out. Was there a particular, when you're coming up with the colors or the logos, or a particular outfit that inspired you more than the rest for the style? And follow-up, is there anything that you wish with his life that you could have also gotten into the movie?
Oh, well, the first one's a more general answer, and that is, you see, Elvis growing up I grew up in a very small country town, smaller than Elvis's, smaller than Tupelo. And, you know, Elvis, of course, there's the shame of his dad, jail, them always moving around. So he always had this big hole in his heart. And I think visually, he absorbed everything he saw around him. It's like you go to a different school, you go like, oh, what are the kids wearing? Oh, you know, don't have short hair. I know something about that. So, and you absorb all these things. So he comes up with what we call the Elvis decorative aesthetic. Like all these graphics you see here, these visual language things, they're a derivation. We invented those based on what we consider to be Elvis's aesthetic. Like it's a look, it's a feel, it's a pattern, you know, and it's constantly evolving throughout his life. You know, you can't believe how shocking it was for him to be wearing Lansky's pink suits. And, you know, his style was fluid before that word was even invented. You know, like lace tops with manly trousers and meaning like it's just such all these different disparate elements come together and yet it makes a style and it's a personal style. So I wouldn't pick one costume. I knew that we had to make sure that we not only copied exactly the style, but we also expressed the style in the whole of the movie.
Yeah.
The second one is the hardest question because there's so many things I had to leave out that were interesting, but didn't necessarily serve the bigger idea. The bigger idea this isn't a biopic per se. I think it's like taking a historical figure, as Shakespeare does, and exploring America in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and these two big gestures, the cell and the soul. Colonel Tom Parker, played by Mr. Hanks, right? He's all about the cell. And then you have the soul, or the invention, the new, something creative and new. These are great American gestures. And when they work together, they bring wonderments. But when the selling gets out of control, when it's the only thing, it destroys the other part. And that's the drama of the movie.
Wonderful.
Oh my God, I have so many questions, but I know it's like it's so hard.
Hit me.
We're not allowed. But
I can't make a speech, but I can answer a question.
The questions, because I was going to ask that one, but I think all right. Well, all right. First, could you tell us about the ring, the EP ring?
Yeah, well, this is the stunt version.
Okay.
These are real.
Ooh, okay.
These are the stunt version of the real EP ring.
Yeah.
You want to do stunts?
Yeah.
You know? But I will tell you about a piece of bling I am proud of. The graphics for the movie is a belt based on Elvis's belt that says Elvis. You see the title. And so I had it made by the Moad jewelry company in precious gems, etc. I wore it on the carpet in Cannes.
Yeah.
And that is truly an exquisite piece of bling. You might have guessed I like bling. I
mean, who doesn't like bling? Yeah.
You look around you.
I know.
I'm getting annoyed.
All right, so I'll ask two questions. But so the first one is, when did this start for you? Were you always into Elvis? Like you mentioned how you came, but I want to know, like, were you just like having coffee one day and was like, this is something I want to do? Like, what was that moment where you're like, I think?
Yeah. Look, as a kid, I grew up in a small country town and we had the gas station and a farm. For a while, we had the cinema. So as like a 7-year-old, the matinee was always an Elvis matinee we would run.
Okay,
All right.
okay,
So I would have saw something like Easy Come, Easy Go and got coolest man in the world. But then I grew up and, I was a ballroom dancer. And around the time I just remember this other day. This actually just popped back in my head. Burning Love was dropped. It was one of his latter singles. And I was having to dance the jive with my partner. I remember getting the single. It was a 45 in those days. And I went up and said, look, mate, do you think you could play like Burning Love? It really gets us going. And we won that comp. But he did go out of my life. I went into sort of the Bowies and, I was a teenager into the Clash and all this sort of music. But Elvis transcends music. Like, he was always present. And for a certain generation, he's almost godlike or iconic like Marilyn Monroe.
Yes.
Probably under 35, though.
Well, yeah.
He's a Halloween costume.
Because
he's not relevant.
Yes, that's what was the whole thing for me when I'm watching this and I'm crying and I'm like, so many people think of him as a character, not a real person.
That's right. That was the mission. I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you said that, because if there was a singular mission, right, and Austin did this. I mean, I helped him, but he did it. He humanized him.
Yeah.
We're here in Graceland, and when you see Priscilla and Lisa Marie and Riley, young Riley, brilliant, by the way, won the Cam Door. What a talent. But, to those three women, he's a husband, a grandfather, a father. He's a person.
Right.
And the humanity, like making him, a very famous musician, won't say, spoiler alert, friend of mine, but so well known, so revered, said, I'm not interested in Elvis. Went in and saw the movie and he came and said, you know what? I felt like, first of all, who is that guy?
Yeah.
And did he sing I said, he sings all the early Elvis.
Yeah.
Right? He sings it with his own voice. He said, I felt like I just met someone I didn't know.
Yes.
I thought that was a great phrase.
Yes.
I just met someone I didn't know.
Yeah.
Whose name happens to be Elvis.
Yeah.
We all think we know him or something of him.
Yeah.
Even if you only I was talking to young Rose from Blackpink the other day, and she says to me, oh, I only knew him as in Lilo and Stitch,
Yeah.
There was a hound dog number.
Yeah, hound in that. Yeah. So let me go back to the idea of when you wanted to do this was just from childhood. You always were fascinated.
No.
with
It was more like I don't make that many movies, and I really always thought, gee, Elvis is so beyond just a singer, so beyond. He's like, there's Marilyn Monroe, and there's Elvis.
Yeah.
Later along comes people like maybe Michael, who I knew.
Yeah.
And then there's Prince, who I worked with twice. I knew Prince quite well. But at that level, they're really, it doesn't matter whether you like their music or not. There's such iconic figures that they're not human.
Yes.
They're just not human beings. They're symbols. And I just thought, what an amazing canvas to look at my favorite subject, which is America, actually.
Right. So, which leads me to the next question, because what was so apparent to me was how you made sure to make it modern. You made sure that the audience knows how Elvis was influenced by Black music and what the struggle of Black America was like, and how important it was that it was then and here we are now in 2022. And I'm assuming you did that on purpose.
Absolutely. I mean, I did it on purpose because it's the truth. I mean, I was living here in Memphis. I went to Tupelo. I had heard of this friend of his called Sam Bell, who's not in a lot of documentaries. And when Dad goes to jail, afterwards he's working itinerant. Mum and Elvis end up in one of the few white houses in the Black community during segregation. And they all become friends, these little kids. Now, they're running around to juke joints and gospel tents. And then there's Elvis's presence on Beale Street, where I was last night. It was amazing to be on Beale Street. It was crazy out down there. But even then, seeing, like, honestly, there was a blues band last night with this young African-American kid on like a double bass, this white boy with long blonde hair, and then this older man singing the blues. I was like, this is amazing. Like, if Elvis were around to see this now, like, it's in the music. Yeah. It's in the music. It's unavoidably in the music. And he was just somewhat of a prism for that. Yeah.
Sorry, I just thought it was so well done and so important because it was
everything.
Yeah.
To me, I say no issue of race in America. You can't tell America without the issue of race, right? And we can get into that in a bigger picture. But no issue of race, no Elvis. Because had Elvis and it's not just black music and gospel and soul, but it's also country, right? And it's white gospel. Like, he's just a kid. He's just absorbing all these influences. And as he said, I never invented this. I mean, he was more enamored of Big Boy Crubbit. And he said, I'll never sing like a Fats Domino. I'll never be that good. B.B. King, that's a real friendship. Have a look at what they say together. The thing is that he's the best of America in the sense that he shows you that all these influences can synthesize and something new comes of it. And I just thought that was so important to tell because it's the truth. I just told the truth.
I'm going to completely switch gears. I want to talk about the pressure of picking the perfect person to play him. And, you know, we've seen the stories coming from radio. I'm like, we've seen the stories that Harry Styles wanted to play him, right? But what about Austin was like, this is the guy?
I mean, I won't go into the Harry thing because, by the way, Harry and I would walk across cut glass to Harry. I know I'm really
Totally same. Yeah, I get it.
Harry is
in
awesome.
different ways.
But like he's his own Elvis. I mean,
Totally.
here's the thing, right? First of all, like what Austin has achieved, we just said it then, is humanizing the icon. And something about it's almost there's been no casting process anywhere near like the journey I've gone on with this. I mean, Austin has talked about it, so I can say it now. He lost his mum in the same year that Elvis did. It was almost like he was spiritually drawn to play this role. Now, from the moment I met him and the 2 years that he lived as Elvis, it wasn't like a method acting thing. It was just like I think they shared this kind of big hole in their heart for loss. I think they share the same sensitivity. They're like that as people. And I think that he slid into the human being that was Elvis. He, like sugar dissipating in milk, he dissipated into the spirit of Elvis. It had to be that to be human enough. Yes, he obsessively worked on the dance moves and the vocals and all of that with Polly Bennett, who also worked with Remy on the Queen movie. But it was more how he could channel the spirit. I mean, when Priscilla saw the movie, and I've never had a more fearful screening in my life. I was in the air and I'm texting, how is she? And there was a female security guard crying. And I said, what's wrong? Has Priscilla left the screening thinking, oh, this is not good? So no, she's emotional because of Priscilla's emotion. And I won't tell you everything that Priscilla wrote to me, but she said the main thing is, like, yes, every gesture, every move, but the human being, the person. And her and Jerry Schilling, Elvis's best friend, said, how did Austin know how to get the anger of Elvis? When Elvis had rages, there's no film of that. There's no recordings of Elvis raging. How did they know that's exactly how he raged? And I said, to be honest with you, guys, I don't know. And I should. I'm the director. Don't tell me.
I should.
I'm incompetent.
Our secret.
Yeah.
that hapless Luhrman guy, fire him. He doesn't know nothing.
Amazing.
So I grew up with Elvis music, but I knew nothing about him. My dad is all kinds of musicians. He plays every instrument you can think of. So I grew up listening to that music and loving it. But I came out of the film feeling like I wanted to go and interrupt the last piano performance and just take him home with me and,
Rescue him.
Yes.
Rescue him.
So to me, I came out of there knowing, truly, finally meeting who Elvis was. And I'm thinking to myself, why don't we have an Elvis now? Like this, he was so ahead of his time.
Yeah.
And now it's like, I feel like we need a head person like that in the music industry that can kind of bring together all of the cultures and do something like that. Do you think that?
I think the word you used is together.
Yes.
See, what I learn about Elvis, I'm the ultimate outsider. I'm Australian. I grew up in a tiny town. And I lived these things, 5 years. The thing I learned about Elvis above and beyond everything else, yes, rock and roll, yes, blues, but above everything else, gospel. And the gospel comes from his spiritual, like, You take someone like Michael, he does moves. Mick Jagger, he learns his moves. Elvis never learnt his moves. He would get on the stage and he would let it flow through him spiritually. Now, if there's one thing that I'm absolutely would defend forever, I don't have to defend it. It's an inherent truth about that man. He was about bringing people together. And I think that's because he grew up where things were pulled apart. He lost his dad to the jail. He keeps moving away from his friends. He loses his mum very early. So his gesture in everything he does is to bring people together without judgment. Right. Without judgment.
So last for me would be the proudest moment for you.
Well,
you had to pick one.
Well, it's not that proud is not a word I ever particularly use in anything I do because I think they're like children, my films. I just remember, when we made Romeo and Juliet and la la la, there are times, and people have a different relationship. I just try and bring them to life. And I never think they're perfect. But I think the thing that I am most thrilled about is that I have helped bring into our space, pop cultural space, an actor like Austin Butler, I'm going to say this word, a new star. And I'm not a promoter guy, but I think that someone like Austin doesn't come along that often. And the fact that he's turned 29, a lot of people are like, wasn't he that kid on Disney? Well, I work with another, I work with another kid, and he used to be in a TV show, and we were rehearsing, and I had to read him a script about a big boat that hits an iceberg, right, around the same time. And you know what? People forgot that he was on the TV show when he went on to have the career that Leonardo's had, you know? And I feel that with Austin, like right under our nose. Who would have thunk it?
Baz, you're an extremely accomplished director. Doing a film like this was the family seal of approval when it was all said and done, and you have received that, which has to mean the world to you.
Yeah. Yes.
Was receiving that on your mind while doing this, and did it add a little extra pressure in wanting to get it right?
Actually, I haven't answered this before, so I'm happy to do it. First of all, I want to give you context. The actual estate is run by these very lovely gents who have a Canadian company called Authentic Brands, and they curate the image of Elvis and look after it. And I say that because it's not out of my own respect and out of my own job, getting it right. I met with Priscilla early on, and Lisa Marie and Riley. But then the pandemic happened. I was shooting Australia. I lost contact with them. I couldn't get to them. I can't tell you, and it went kind of funny because also it's not my place to go into things that happened personally in their life or my life, but we both had things going on that made contact difficult, not the right time, when to reach out. I said about the screening and what happened with Priscilla, what it meant to me. But I can tell you that during post, the one thing, things don't kind of freak me out. I'm not like, I've done this all my life. But the one thing that I used to go to bed with and wake up sometimes in the middle of the night going like, oh my God, is disappointing them, that they feel like somehow I've taken their lives and been disrespectful or not really cared that Elvis is not for them a Halloween costume or a god. He's a husband and a dad and a grandfather. So the answer is, it gave me many sleepless nights. It really did, because I just didn't want to get it wrong.
And at what point did you realize that you had gotten it so right?
When I eventually said, well, I've got to screen it for them. And I said that story about I was screening for Priscilla. I was in the air. There was the guard that was crying and all of that. Then Priscilla wrote me a letter, and I won't say everything in it. Then Lisa Marie, I happened to be there doing post, and Lisa Marie came, and she is very private, and, the personal life, not to go into here. But she went to see it, and I remember being there for it at the end. A lot of executives from Warner's, everyone wanted to be nice, She said, do I have to speak? I said, don't. I just took her to the car on my own. She was in such a state. And I remember, I think I can share this because she looked up and she said something like, I can't put and I thought she was going to say, she was very emotional, it into words. I thought she was going to say, I can't put it into words. But I went to say it, thank God I didn't. She said, I can't put a value on what I've just seen. Wow. And it was...
Wow, that's beautiful.
It was big for me.
So unlike most everybody who you've spoken to in this session, I was not familiar with Elvis Presley music. I did grow up similar to how you grew up and how Elvis grew up in West Texas, segregated tiny town, all of that. So as I was researching, I came across an interview that Priscilla Presley did with Barbara Walters in 1985.
Yeah.
And I would not be doing a job as a woman in this industry if I didn't, my job, if I didn't tell you it was very difficult to watch that interview as a mother of 3 daughters, knowing that they began their relationship when she was only 14.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Is there a reason that that's not mentioned in the movie? Were you afraid somewhat to offend his fans?
No, I mean, like,
because
look,
it's hard. I was just watching it, and I didn't know all of that.
I'm really, look, I have my daughter's, actually, she's 18 now, but I keep thinking she's eternally 14.
So you know, though.
I know.
I know. It's like,
I absolutely know.
It was so hard to get through that interview.
Yeah, and what I will tell you is this. I spoke to Priscilla about it. I mean, here's the fact of the matter, right? And I'm not going to go into right or wrong or all of that.
Right.
What I do know is, yes, she was 14. She was a teenager when they met. And yes, the relationship was sort of long distance. But what I do know is the actual what's the word for having sex,
When they consummated?
Thank you. That moment truly happened when they got married. Right? Now, does that mean it's right or wrong? I'm not.
Well, I doubt you'd ship your daughter off at 16 to live with somebody overseas. I mean, no matter what, right? I mean, it's still controversial. Were you afraid, in a way, to disappoint the family if you mentioned that in the movie?
Well, no, I didn't leave it out because, like, there's so much. Right. Like, there's other controversial stuff I would like to put in. I mean, when Elvis is when he becomes so imbibed with drugs. Look, I knew, can I tell you, I knew Michael Jackson, right? And I worked with Prince twice. And both of them were anti-drugs. And both of them were addicted to were addicted to all sorts of drugs, actually. Their meds. Same thing happened to Elvis. Now, I have some of that in the movie, but at some point he goes down and goes to the White House and opens the window and says, I'm here because I want to become a drug law enforcement officer. And I just think that's so out there. And
it's because the doctor's giving it to them. And
right. But you see, I wanted to lean into that more too, because I think that's one of the silly things that Elvis did, because unfortunately he was addicted to opioids, and you do crazy things on drugs. The reason I bring that up is the whole issue of the detail, because Scylla goes and lives with Vernon down here while Elvis is in Vegas. I mean, it's bonkers, but this wasn't like, I mean, one thing I will tell you about Elvis, right, is I think there's a very big difference between someone who's hanging around schoolyards, right, and a relationship that ends up having a child and a granddaughter. Like, there's a family born of this union. Okay, so I'm not here to say it was right or wrong. I mean, the man is...
You're just telling the story.
Yeah, like Elvis is, as all great artists are, and all human beings, has flaws. The difference is the fundamental human being, the fundamental truth of that man is that not only was he spiritual and kind, but he was a uniter. Is it lonely to lose your mother, to be famous overnight, the first person ever that teenagers had just invented? Suddenly, there's no precedent for a guy who's a truck driver 1 minute and 1 year later is richer than you can imagine, more famous on the planet, and right at that moment, bang, your mother dies. And you're put in a tin ship.
He was the most influential person in his life, and he loved dearly.
And he's in a tin boat, and he's sent off to Germany. He doesn't know that the colonel's thinking it's a good idea to have him isolated like this. And yeah, there's a daughter there of an American officer that hanging out. It's like the whole detail in that scene with the door open and all of that, the 50s. I mean, all of that. Would I feel a bit uncomfortable about my 14-year-old hanging out with a 26-year-old? Now, yes. In the 50s, is it different? I don't know, because you have to unpack it inside their lives. What I do know is that Elvis did not spend his life,
searching for children.
Yeah, and I think that we've seen a lot of that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.